Hello and welcome to Yorkshire Voice. You're joining us for a special programme today, The Voices of Windrush. I'm Tom Heath. Next month marks Windrush Day, a day celebrating the contribution of a generation of people who travelled from the Caribbean to the UK to help rebuild the economy following the Second World War. Windrush was the name of one of the boats which brought workers here, but it's become synonymous with the political scandal that erupted 3 years ago, involving the wrongful deportation of people from those British colonies in the Caribbean. In a moment, we'll be talking to the Guardian reporter who uncovered the story. But first, let's hear from some of those who settled in the Chapeltown area of Leeds. Here's Gloria Hanley, who arrived in 1968 and eventually became a midwife, delivering over 200 babies, many of them at home.
I'm from the Windrush generation. Even though I was born in 1948, I didn't actually come on any boat or any ship. Yes, I arrived here in 1968. Oh, it was a shock. It was April. And when we landed at Heathrow Airport and we were alighting, couldn't see anything. It was, well, in those days, I thought it was smoke. But later on, I learned it was fog. And it was cold and I didn't have a coat. And when I got inside the terminal and I looked out, I really wanted to turn right around and get back on that plane. Yes, it was horrible. When I arrived here to train as a nurse, to my horror, the training was only for 2 years and the certificate was as an enrolled nurse, not the state registered nurse that I was expecting. And the enrolled nurse certificate wasn't valid in the Caribbean. So I felt I was tricked in coming here to train as a nurse. After the war, the indigenous population weren't taking on the jobs like cleaning and driving the buses and working in the hospitals and working on the railway. So the Windrush generation filled that gap. We, because I am part of it, held up the National Health Service. It's been a rewarding career for me. And I don't have, and people ask me this question all the time, but it's well over 200 babies that I've delivered. The ones that I can remember that are so memorable to me are the ones that I delivered at home, because no medical intervention, no doctors, just mom and sometimes partner and myself, and we do it at our own pace. My first delivery at home, once the baby was delivered, mom was crying, father was crying, midwife was crying, baby was crying, because I was crying for the reason that I've done this all by myself, and nothing went wrong. I've written my story so that my children know exactly why I came and what I did. So the story really needs to be told about the Windrush generation. Britain would not have survived without us.
That was Gloria Hanley, one of Chapeltown's influential figures, due to be featured in a special exhibition that will be staged on Windrush Day on the 22nd of June. The exhibition will be running for 6 months, and our team of Yorkshire Voice reporters have been given exclusive access to the key characters in the community whose stories we have been documenting for this exhibition. In a moment, we'll find out more about that, but first, let's hear from Claude Hendrickson from the Leeds West Indian Centre.
I'm of the first generation of children that were born from that Windrush generation. So my mother came here in 1958 and I was born in 1960. So I'm of that first generation of children that were actually born in the UK. I grew up not very far from here. In fact, just across the main road and behind there where the new Holy Rosary School is where I lived. Chapeltown, historically, like many of the other black areas where black people were settled in the UK, were actually quite in transit areas. So it was where a lot of the worst housing was. So yeah, things like that I remember. I mean, when we were growing up, we lived in that time when there was no Irish, no blacks, no dogs. You were hearing names, you were being called names, you didn't understand why. I suppose we got to a point back then where we were being told, why don't you go back where you come from? But we were born here. So it was a bit of a confusing time, very confusing. I think in Leeds, I see black people as the spice of Leeds. So we've added spice to Leeds. They had just had fish and chips before. Now they've got curries and Caribbean restaurants and all of that. After the racial riots of 1975, and again in 81, one of the things that became evident that we needed our own place. So the West Indian Centre, I think it was established in 1983. My role here, I came back to the West Indian Centre because I've done various things around the community to be the director of the Leeds Bicentenary Project. I then left and came back again. So now I'm part of the kind of the fabric now. I do think it's important that we establish projects, we establish buildings, we establish a sense of we were here. I think it's absolutely important to preserve history, to tell the stories of the journeys of the people that came. I mean, my mother, when she came over, I think she spent something like 3.5 weeks on a boat down in the bottom of a boat to get here. I think it's important that we do pay respect to those that laid the foundation.
That was Claude Hendrickson from the Leeds West Indian Centre. Now, earlier today, I spoke to Guardian reporter and author of The Windrush Betrayal, Amelia Gentleman. Her work was instrumental in bringing the Windrush scandal to light in 2018. I began by asking her about the background of Windrush Day.
Windrush Day is something that campaigners have been calling on the government to introduce, I think probably for decades, but it was finally introduced in 2018 by Theresa May's government in response to the Windrush scandal. So Theresa May and her Home Secretary then, Amber Rudd, apologised for the Home Office's immigration scandal in April of 2018, when it became obvious that the government had wrongly classified thousands of people as illegal immigrants. And most of these people were from the Caribbean, and this notion of a Windrush Day was created, I suppose, or granted by the government as part of a series of apologies and efforts to put things right after the full scale of that kind of Home Office catastrophe became known.
Would you be able to explain your part and your role in exposing the Windrush scandal?
So I'm a reporter with The Guardian, and from about 2017 onwards, I was writing pieces about people who had moved to the UK as children in the 1950s and the 1960s, entirely legally, from Commonwealth countries, who were, as they approached retirement age, beginning to experience really serious difficulties with their immigration status. Many of them have been told entirely wrongly by the Home Office that they were illegal immigrants. And as a result, some had been arrested, some of them had been detained in immigration removal centres, a few had been wrongly deported, but many more have been denied services, have been denied the right to NHS healthcare, or to their pensions, or have been sacked from their workplaces because their employers faced a fine if they were found to be employing anybody who was thought to be an illegal immigrant. These were issues that we were highlighting in The Guardian for about 6 months, until the Home Office finally acknowledged that there was a serious problem and promised to do right by those people affected.
In your opinion, how do you think we can move forward into the future after everything that's happened, and you know, continue with these Windrush days and a celebration, I guess?
I mean, I think that there is a lot of warmth about the notion of a Windrush Day. As I say, it was something that has been campaigned for years before it was actually granted, and for years before there was any notion of the scandal. So the fact that the government has granted, I think it's about £500,000 to mark the day, is generally seen as a positive thing in the abstract. I suppose for some people, though, it has been caught up with this rather kind of tainted attempt by officials to smooth over this really, really terrible thing that happened. And so, yeah, perhaps it's become slightly kind of soured with the ongoing campaign to get justice for all of the people affected by the Windrush immigration scandal. And I think it's worth noting that a lot of people who are still struggling for justice are more interested in the first instance in getting compensation, and the move towards paying compensation has been fairly slow. We're kind of 3 years on now from the breaking of the scandal, and only a very small amount has been paid out of the compensation pot. So yeah, it's really difficult, because on the one hand, everybody does want to celebrate Windrush Day as a marker of the extraordinary contribution that this cohort of migrants to the UK have played in rebuilding Britain after the Second World War, in you know, extraordinary contributions to the NHS and to other sectors. But on the other hand, there is this kind of bittersweet feeling, because justice still remains quite elusive for a number of people affected by the scandal.
Guardian reporter and author of The Windrush Betrayal, Amelia Gentleman. Now, for Heather Nelson, remembering the Windrush generation is crucial in bringing communities together. Heather is the founder of Black Health Initiative in Chapeltown.
Windrush to me means the invitation that was sent out by Britain to the islands that they had previously colonialised, and they invited many across to help rebuild Britain after the war. So it was an invitation by the motherland to come over and help rebuild a country that many had held in high esteem and had aspired to come across. My grandparents, they came across. My grandfather came originally, and then sent for his wife, and he had 12 children, or they had 12 children. And so they sent for their children once they had settled, and they came across to England, and I believe they settled in Wolverhampton first. My grandfather was one of the first Black bishops in the UK. So he came across to help with spirituality and faith of those who had settled here, because they weren't always welcome in the churches that were already here. They had to worship within each other's houses or in community centres, etc. The saying is actually from Jamaica, and it's said as "we're little but we're Talawa." And that just means that we're a small island with a huge impact. And so I've taken that to describe Black Health Initiative, which is we're a small charity, but we have a huge impact. And that impact is looking at the inequities in education, health and social care that happens, especially those from the visible minority groups, as in Black, Asian and minority ethnic. Definitely the incidents that had happened 50, 60, 70 years ago are still happening now. I think it's just in a different format. So it was interesting that recently there was a race equality report that spoke about institutional racism. I think when it was very much overt when my grandparents came across, you know, with incidents, no Black, no Irish, no dogs. So, you know, people didn't have to think that they had to hide their racism. It was there, it was in your face. I think now it's covert. And for me, that's more insidious because it means that we can't see it, so we can't deal with it. Teaching needs to happen. So we need to be taught history all through our academic years, through schooling, and all the educators need to be taught about that. I think we have Black History Month. For me, that can be counterproductive. I think Black history should be taught through all of the curriculum, because you can find us, and I say us because obviously I'm a Black woman, you can find us in a number of different modules, you know, from inventors to creators to you name it. We've been there. So there isn't a lack of representation, but there's a lack of willingness to use those representation.
That was Heather Nelson of Black Health Initiative. Now, Patrick, Bernard and Jason Pitter are both children of parents from the Windrush generation, and they've both pursued careers in law. Jason is a barrister and lawyer, and Patrick is the head of Bernard Solicitors. Here are their stories.
My mother always said, education, education. You know, she said, study hard at school, education. Especially the Black boy, you know. So that was it, really. So education. And even though I wasn't that great at academics, I used to always fail. But she'd say, you never fail till you give up.
There weren't people who were lawyers around me at that stage, weren't barristers, weren't many doctors. But I always sensed I had encouragement from within my own community. So there were people who, you know, were able to say, listen, you have the ability to progress. I've always felt people have, certainly the people I know, have encouraged me to achieve as much as I can.
And I just kept on going, even though a lot of people say, oh, you know, one or two people say, you'll never become a lawyer. You'll never make it.
And I think there's a moral obligation then to return and repay. Not just, certainly so far as Black children and children from ethnic minorities, not just to the extent of saying, well, I'm going to open a door. In a sense, opening a door is the easy part. You don't open a door, let somebody into a room without turning the lights on. And turning on the lights is the important part. So it's opening the door, turning on the lights, showing them what's in the room, showing them how to navigate, negotiate around the room. The living circumstances people were in, people complaining about the injustices of those interactions. I think those are some of the things that influenced then my decision to go into law.
The Windrush generation descendants, please go for it. And it's not easy, you know, going through education. It wasn't easy. As I say, you're going to get a lot of people tell you ain't going to make it. Even some people, you know, you from your own community tell you ain't going to make it. But you've got to press on. And I assure you, it's worth it in the end. I'm so grateful for my mum and my family's encouragement. It's paid off in the end.
People just should not look at themselves now without some regard to where they've come from. That should shape where you're going to. The two things go together. And that's why I said, look, you can make progress now and you can lose that progress. I mean, how do you make that back up without having an understanding of how you got to where you are?
Joining me now is Adrian Green from Unity Enterprise, a community organisation in Chapeltown who's helped organise the exhibition. Adrian, thank you for joining us today. What is Unity Enterprise and what work do you do?
Thanks, Tom. So Unity Enterprise is a wholly owned subsidiary of Unity Housing Association, which was set up 33 years ago, based in the Chapeltown area, to provide housing and overcome the housing of the community. Around 20 years ago, Unity Enterprise was formed, and it comprises of 3 business centres around the Chapeltown area, all multi-tenanted, comprising of around 87 different businesses, predominantly from the BME community. Some are start-up, some have been established businesses, some have been spoken on the programme to you before, that are tenants, and we just try and help employment within the local area and try and encourage sort of young entrepreneurs into schemes and becoming self-employed, just giving them a different route.
So obviously this year you'll be doing a Windrush exhibition. So what exactly will that consist of?
It was brought about to celebrate what people brought to the area and how they've shaped Leeds, England as a whole, the UK as a whole. The exhibition will consist of videos of interviews with influential people and the Windrush generation that are descendants and have set up businesses on themselves. It will also consist of a photographic exhibition with different stories telling them where they've come from, how they've set up, where they're going, and try and be an inspiration to the youth of today as such.
So how has the community responded, the Chapeltown community responded to the exhibition? Of people being willing to participate? Are people looking forward to it?
I think the filming you've done with some of the tenants over the past few days would show that people are willing to tell the story, are keen to tell the story. We're focusing very much on the celebration of the fact and that people are in business and shape the community. And fingers crossed, assuming we're allowed to open it on Windrush Day, the day after the restrictions cease in the country, it should be a success, and hoping to take it out to schools as well.
So what was the driving force behind running an exhibition like this? What's the reasons, why you decided to do it this year?
I think unity is embedded in the community of Chapeltown. We've got 1,300 social housing, and then we've got the enterprise side connected to it. We're obviously aware of the Windrush scandal, but we want to turn it and have it as a celebration to embrace the people that came across.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much, Adrian.
Thank you very much, Tom.
Unity Enterprise is a big supporter of local businesses, and as part of the exhibition, we are highlighting many of the entrepreneurs who run thriving businesses within the Chapeltown community. Sharon Smithen owns Calabash Cafe on Chapeltown Road, and just next door is Beverly McLaughlin, florist and sewing shop, Petals and Stitches. Here are their stories.
My parents came over on a boat. It wasn't called Windrush, but it was exactly the same sort of situation. They came over, they left their kids back in the West Indies to try and make a better life for themselves. And then when they were able to send for them and bring them over. So I've got 3 sisters back in the West Indies and 3 sisters that were brought over here. It's a nice place to grow up in. Never had any problems. So yeah, quite happy. It went through a little blip where we used to have a lot of trouble with gangs and stuff like that. But a lot of people are wanting to buy and move back into Chapeltown now. So that just goes to show that it's come on a hell of a lot. Calabash is the place to be. Yeah, we are very friendly. We invite anybody in. Doesn't matter who you are, where you're from. You could be somebody who's only got £1 in your pocket. We'd still feed you, just even to sit down and just have a chat. So that's just what Calabash is.
My parents, they were of the Windrush generation, so they came over in, I'd say, about 1956, 58. My mum came in 58, my dad 56. It's important to celebrate it because it's part of history, and it's important that people like myself and who are younger understand about the Windrush generation, what it took to get here, and what it took to live here as well. Things didn't come easy for my parents and my sisters. So yeah, and I think it is important to celebrate it. It shouldn't be something that's forgotten because it did happen, and that's why I'm here. I'm a product of the Windrush generation.
Beverly McLaughlin and Sharon Smithen there. And if you want some authentic Caribbean food or a beautiful bouquet, you can find them both on Chapeltown Road. Now, at university, he trained as a mechanical engineer, but for the last 50 years, Hugh Boncondor has been designing costumes for the Leeds West Indian Carnival. He tells us about his connection to the Windrush generation.
My connection stems from my mom and dad, really. They came over in the 50s, and they came over to try and settle and make a new life. And there were 4 of their children left behind. And so I was like the last of the 4 that actually brought over here to England. One of the things that I can always remember being really, really strange was seeing, it was November I came over, and it was a really bright sunny day, but it was cold. It was like kind of weird, you know, the sun shining and yet still it's cold. And so I couldn't compute that concept, but that was about the weirdest thing. I was only about 3 years old when my mom left. I instantly recognized my dad. Just one of those things, yes, just knowing him straight away. They talk about the struggles in terms of how they had to live. I remember writing my mom's eulogy when she passed away, and she spoke about, I remember reflecting on the fact that she spoke about when they first came, how they managed to scrimp and scrape, how they would share a bottle of Mackerson. I don't know if you have Mackersons at the time, but this share bottle of Mackerson that lasted them for a couple of days, because that's how they tried to economize on what they had to eat and drink. When I was in the Caribbean, being brought up as a kid, every Christmas, you know, it was carnival in St. Kitts anyway, and so I was very much into that particular part of the culture. And so when I finished school here in England, it was great to have the opportunity then of joining the Carnival Committee. And it was really great because it was the first time I had been with a group of people where we were in the majority, unlike, you know, work and everything else I've been along, where I was very much singular in a lot of cases, but very much in the minority. But in the Carnival, you know, we were the majority, and it was really great just having that kind of togetherness, almost like it was in the Caribbean.
That was Hugh Boncondor, the award-winning Carnival costume maker, and didn't those costumes look fantastic? And of course, Leeds West Indian Carnival is one of the biggest events in Chapeltown's calendar. It has been running now for 53 years. The event, which involves jaw-dropping costumes, rousing beats, and mouth-watering food, occurs every year on the August bank holiday. We spoke to Carnival pioneer Arthur France, among others, to hear what the event means to the community.
If you're going into Carnival looking for money or prestige, you're in the wrong business. You ain't gonna last.
In Chapeltown, our contribution, Leeds hosts, for example, the longest running carnival in Europe, African Caribbean Carnival, outside of London now.
If you can stand on the stage in the park, Port Newton Park, and you see the vast amount of people in the park, all of different nationalities come together for that one day, no arguments, in peace and harmony, it's amazing. That's what I love.
I'm always interested in, you know, what you're going to leave behind. Not all. We need an event that will bring us together in harmony. An event where you don't need an invite. Everybody needs to come and have a good time. And nobody believes it could have happened. An amazing journey.
And that has taken us to the end of our programme. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed what you've seen. From me and everybody else at Yorkshire Voice, I hope you have a good evening and a great weekend. Goodbye.